All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to A Flawed Man this Monday evening. If you are not tuning into the national championship, which you shouldn't, because Alabama and Georgia are garbage. Nobody likes the SEC, and we're all just tired of watching them to begin with. But I'm your host, Stuart Davis, with Flawed Man of God. I am just an average, everyday Christian, trying to give you some emphasis. I'm not a pastor. I'm not a biblical scholar. I'm not any of those things. I'm just here to give you kind of just some insights on thoughts and feelings of somebody who's been a Christian all their life, and his knowledge is mostly in the Bible. This is my friend Eric Rolon. He is here as a apologetics as my apologetics expert in here to give us kind of what he has been able to research and some conclusions he's been able to come up with. So with that said, he's going to be giving you those conclusions. Now, you might find them very insightful. You might find them very enlightening. You might not agree, and it might spark you to do some research in yourself. Either way that lands, awesome. We'd want to get you more into the Bible, more into the knowledge, because the more you read of the good book, the more you are going to glean from it and get closer to that walk with God. So, Eric, I'll let you do your introduction, and
Sure.
we'll go from there.
Well, thanks again so much for having me. I really enjoyed our talk on Nephilim last time. Hopefully, this microphone will not be cutting out like the last one was. So I felt like, oh no, he's supposed to be this, super Chad in the AV department, and I just dropped the ball completely there. But it should be a really good talk tonight for those who are just tuning in who haven't watched any of Stuart's content before. Very great stuff he's got on his channel. I know he says he's just a flawed man of God, but he has a lot of awesome insights. So please check out his other videos that he has. Tonight's topic is going to be all about the 12 tribes of Israel. It's going to be where they started, where they're going, and eventually where they will all end up. We're probably going to end up breaking this into probably two separate conversations because there was a lot of information to cover, and I doubt we'll get to all of it in the next 2 hours.
Oh, and we don't just have 12 sons. We've got 12 sons plus 2 sons from Joseph. So
that we do.
It's a lot of content. And this is what kind of sparked it. One of the things I'm doing is a read through of the Bible, in which we're going through it verse by verse. I do about 2 to 3 chapters a night, depending on how long they are. And we haven't gotten the Leviticus or Lamentations yet, so we haven't made it real heavy, hard to get through stuff. But in Genesis, which is full of great content, the one thing you notice when you're going through it is Jacob talking to his sons, and his sons are, there's Joseph, there's Benjamin, and then there's the rest of the guys, right? Reuben's kind of prevalent, but we all know, Jacob's favorites are are Joseph and Benjamin. But when you read, as we go through later, and we go through Exodus with Moses through the wilderness to the promised land, we see the Israelites get settled, and through the Exodus and throughout the kingdoms of Israel and Judah, we see a lot of tribal infighting, and it seems like a lot of personalities come to play. And what caught my eye when I did my read through of the Bible and when I was coming through again here was that it seems like there seems like there is a connection to what Jacob / Israel says to his sons about them on his deathbed. And because it was almost like he's talking to his sons, but he's also like he's talking past his sons. So that was one of the things that I had reached out to you, Eric, about, and say, what's going on with this? There's more to this here. There's obviously more to this, because he's clearly prophesying.
Oh yeah, and like it's super interesting too, and it's by no mistake that you're doing your read through right now, and that we're going to touch on this kind of before you even get to Leviticus, because a lot of this has a lot of its roots directly in Leviticus. When you actually get into the Levites, what their role inside the whole nation of Israel was, when you get to the Mosaic priests, when you get to Aaron and his sons, so much of this hinges off directly the 12 tribes. So there's a lot of interesting things that Jacob says, and then you get to get Moses's take on the 12 tribes. This is later on in Deuteronomy 33. eventually we see everything codified in Revelation 7, and that's with the sealing of the 144,000. And throughout this whole journey, largely inside, I want to say between Genesis up into Second Chronicles, there is just this roller coaster that happens. And being that the Bible is honestly the best commentary on itself, you have to take the entirety of the book cover to cover to really figure out, okay, Jacob said this, but where does the logical outworking of all that he said actually finalize itself? And then, where does what Moses said also fit into there? Um, a lot of research went into this. I've done a lot of independent research, and actually a lot of what I'm going to provide tonight comes by way of Chuck Missler and his crew over at Koinonia House. So I've kind of blended what I've found, what he's found together, and Chuck saved us all hours and hours and hours and hours of library research, just with the depth of all that he actually goes down the rabbit hole into. So it's gonna be fun.
Yeah. And that's what and that's kind of what we're doing here, folks, because we're trying to clear things up and put things into context that might come up as you're reading through, and it might just go through your head, huh? Well, this sounds somewhat connected with this thing going back here, or why are they acting like this? Man, like I said, you're going to see fighting, and I'm going to go through this when we hit these chapters. Through the read through is. Remember, the 12 tribes of Israel, it's just like a giant family, right? And you've got, at this point, probably multiple millions of people, not just the million plus going through the desert and the wilderness, but multiple millions of people. And they're all in tribes, but they're all kind of in their little portioned out areas of Israel. And they're going to fight. There's going to be rivalries. There's going to be, there's going to be politics in play.
Yep.
Unfortunately for us all, we're all flawed. And that is definitely a recurring theme with the Israelites, and the fact that they cannot get out of their own way most of the time. And that's what we're going to have. They're not going to live a lot of the life that God instructs for them. And they suffer as a consequence.
Yeah. And it's really interesting. And I guess as kind of the caveat going into this, a lot of people, especially those who are, let's call them unread Christians, or just those who live largely inside the New Testament, they look at what they perceive to be a different God in the Old Testament compared to the New. And a lot of the questions that I often get posed when somebody is trying to figure out, okay, well, you believe in God and you're such a huge proponent for Christianity, then explain X, Y, and Z to me. Well, what they typically will ask me is, okay, how do you explain all the cruelty and suffering in the world? We see a God who's completely vengeful inside the Old Testament, and then we see the New Testament where it's all about grace and loving your neighbor. Like, why did God change? It's not that God changed. It's that you have the Old Testament, which is following his nation of people. New Testament is following his son and the teachings that his son put forth, and then the outworkings of all that. As the good word says, he is the same yesterday, today, and forever. But the difference is you have covenant starts with Abraham, it gets re-solidified with Moses, and then it ends with Jesus Christ. And so being that God is sworn to uphold his covenants with all whom he makes them, he has to allow himself to essentially, what's the word? I guess act on those covenants as extremely as the day that he first said them. So like in Isaiah, when he talks about essentially what he's alluding to is Jesus being the new covenant, or when Moses, when they recodify it inside Exodus 24. There's a lot that happens, and there is a specific reason for all the violence that you see. Like Stuart said, there will be some violent times that we're going to talk about here. There's about 90 instances of war within the Old Testament. And anytime that the Israel is not fighting with either a Nephilim or a Rephaim tribe, it's typically they're fighting with a Moabite tribe, which is descended from Lot, or they're fighting amongst themselves. A lot of civil war happens.
Themselves, yes.
Yeah. I figure probably the best place that we can start is to just start off with the names of the sons.
Okay.
They're essentially their own lineages, and we can actually get into what their names mean. it's really super interesting inside the Bible when you see the meaning associated with the name and you look at how that person's life played out and you're like, wow, this is crazy, because their name really seems to be in line with how they either lived their life or how they were. So we have in Genesis, book of Genesis, we have first you've got Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. So Jacob is where we see really the fullness of the family of Israel really take root. You got Jacob, he's working for his uncle. He ends up thinking he's going to get his wife Rachel. Instead, he gets swapped out. He's got Leah. Works another 7 years. Then he has Rachel, finally has access to, as the Bible puts it, the wife he loved.
Yeah. That he didn't get hoodwinked into marrying.
Yeah. And so through Leah and Jacob, we have the first of 4 of his sons. We've got Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Then Rachel, she submits her handmaiden to Jacob, and this was a common practice in the day. More or less,
Sarah did it.
yeah, exactly. And what was really interesting is inside Jewish law, to take a concubine, you actually had to take her to wife. So it wasn't as just like he was just getting a piece on the side. Like, no, Bilhah, which is Rachel's handmaid, actually becomes his wife.
Right.
And that way his sons are allowed to enjoy the entire full benefit of his blessing that's passed down to them. Because according to Jewish law, a bastard could not enter the unity of the rest of the tribe of Israel until the 10th generation, which is why we see with Judah, they're essentially excluded until David, 10 full generations later. But that's a different talk for a different time.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the interesting thing of, Judah in and of himself. Jacob seems to have we talk about, Joseph the favorite, right? That's the overarching theme of the story of Joseph.
Oh yeah,
and then Benjamin behind him because he's the two of his favorite, right? Rachel's his favorite, so the two that she had are his favorites, and Benjamin's the baby. But Judah also seems to have when we look at his blessing, seems to have a strong part in Jacob's heart, and Judah makes some mistakes before leading up to this. There's a whole side quest, if we want to look at it in the Bible as an RPG. It's a whole side quest of Judah, not making some decisions you'd be proud of that you'd want written in your obituary. But
yeah,
Jacob knows. I'm assuming he knows what's going on with this, but still, he's got a favored spot where I would have probably put Reuben up there at the top, but
right. And Reuben, he ends up losing out on his blessing largely for a real big faux pas that he makes early on. But back to it. So we have Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, the first 4. Those come from Leah. Then from Bilhah, which is Rachel's handmaid, we have Dan and Naphtali. Then essentially Leah's like, well, shoot, while the getting's good, might as well give him my handmaid too. So here's another wife for you, Jacob. And Leah's handmaid is Zilpah, and she has Gad and Asher. Then we go to finally Rachel. Her womb is open. She is blessed with Joseph. Then we jump back to Leah. We have Issachar and Zebulun. And then we jump back to Rachel, where she has Benjamin, the youngest of the 12. And then eventually from Joseph, we'll have Manasseh and Ephraim, who later on Jacob will actually adopt as his sons. And they end up being able to partake of the blessings that he does give to them.
Because of course he does.
Oh dude, yeah.
Joseph's kids. It's just...
Yeah, like I'm sure that in his mind, Jacob's like, dude, I got 4 sons out of Rachel. This is fantastic.
Yeah. Well, somebody ought to make an edit of the meme where the guy's holding the dog and the cat's in the background. But it should be it should be 11 other cats, and it's just the dog, and you think Joseph, and everybody's the other one else, because that's literally how it feels. And then it's just like, oh, you've got 2 sons? Oh yeah, I've got plenty of other grandsons and granddaughters, but these two are gonna be just like sons to me. And I haven't even met them yet. I haven't met them yet. I just heard about them because I met you, and I've been reunited with you. But maybe he looks at it, and Jacob's probably got a big part of favoritism, but also the fact that his sons have have not known him, whereas the other sons and grandsons have obviously been able to partake in that. So
what's
maybe
really interesting too, and I want to say that this lends some credence as to why Jacob really, really loved Joseph and Benjamin so much. And this actually directly ties to Abraham and how Isaac was Abraham's second son. However, Isaac is known as his first and only begotten son because he was the son of the promise. Well, Joseph, I believe, is viewed that same exact way for Jacob because he was of the wife that, again, he loved. And so, being that he was essentially the first to open the womb, which according to tradition and even according to the good book, therein with the first child lays the largest blessing. But then we'll eventually see from Joseph, because Joseph is already madly blessed. When it gets to his son's blessing, Joseph is like, yeah, here's the firstborn and here's the secondborn, and we see Jacob actually switch his hands over to bless the younger over the older. But I guess what'll kind of set the scene for us here in this, for anybody trying to take notes, I recommend turning on your captions when you watch back through this, because I'm going to give you the meanings of the sons' names in order that they were born. And then I'll give you, eventually we'll get to Manasseh and Ephraim a little later, but hold these names inside your head if you can while we go through this, because they really, really play into how these guys' lives and then their tribes eventually will work out. So for Reuben, we have, his name is Behold a Son. Simeon, heard, or he hears me. Levi, joined to. Judah, praise, or praise God. Dan, judge, or will judge. Naphtali, wrestling, or struggles with God. We have Gad, troop, or fortune. Asher, happy, fortune, or luck. Then we have Joseph. His is Yahweh has added, or Yahweh has added unto. Then we have Issachar, which is recompense. We have Zebulun, which is exalted, and then Benjamin, which is son of the right hand. So try and bear that in mind. If you guys had the captions on, hopefully you had time to jot them down. If not, pause the video and we'll go back to it. But we both have the same chapter open here in Genesis 49. And for those who aren't really familiar with where we are inside the biblical timeline, Genesis 49 is after Joseph has been sold into slavery by his brothers. He has gone through being sold to a man named Potiphar, being accused of sexual impropriety by Potiphar's wife. He spends several years inside a prison. He ends up interpreting dreams for a baker and for the Pharaoh's cupbearer. Then 3 years later, the Pharaoh's cupbearer is like, oh, shoot, yeah, I remember this guy who can interpret dreams. You had a miserable dream. We should probably get him up here. Long story short, Joseph ends up becoming essentially the second most powerful man in the world. Because up to this point, with all the famine that's taken place and all the different nations that are coming to Egypt at the tail end of this 7-year famine that they had, Egypt is the most prosperous place on planet Earth. The Pharaoh is literally ruler of the world, Joseph second under him. So at the end, Joseph has brought his other 11 brothers. He's brought his father, Jacob, pretty much all of Jacob's house to now live in this really just beautiful and lush place in Egypt. So this is after the big reunion, after everybody's been brought together. Jacob is nearing the end of his life. This is a few years after they've come to Egypt. And so now he is going to bestow a blessing on all of his sons. Much like as we saw with Isaac, where he goes to bless Jacob and Esau. Well, because Jacob, snuck in there and essentially stole the birthright, Jacob was blessed way more than Esau, but Esau was also blessed as well. And they both end up having pretty successful lives. But it's sort of it's a definite rite of passage from the father. And it really is a passing on of whatever blessings were bestowed to them. They then are imparting that to their children. So with the first one, and we're going to kind of go in tandem here. I'll be giving you the insights from Genesis 49, which is where we see the first blessings coming down from Jacob. And then we're going to be jumping back and forth between that and Deuteronomy 33. Deuteronomy 33 is where Moses is actually speaking blessings over the tribes of Israel as well. And this is going to be, you have Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. We're going from the beginning of the Torah to the end of the Torah. So you'll see there's going to be some little gaps here, which we're going to fill in for you. But some of them might start off really bad and end up pretty good. Some might start off really good and end up pretty bad. But jumping into it initially, we have Reuben. That's who Jacob starts with. And he's praised initially. The prophecy over him, he says, hey, he's unstable as water. You shall not have preeminence. And it's largely in part to Reuben, who nailed his father's concubine.
Oh, yeah. Forgot about that.
Yeah, sucks for Reuben because Reuben was the firstborn. And firstborn of Leah, not Rachel, but he should have had the bigger portion of all the blessings. But Reuben screwed up. So jumping forward to Deuteronomy 33, where Moses speaks of him, he says, let his men be few in number. That's Deuteronomy 33. You have the first numbering of all his, I guess, all the tribes, the first numbering or first census taken in Numbers 1. And that first numbering is 46,500. Second numbering is in Numbers 26, and it's dropped by almost 3 full thousand. It's 43,730. Almost all of the other tribes of Israel had increased dramatically in number by that point. So it seems like there was a definite dwindling in his number for sure. Next up, we have Simeon, and we'll do Simeon and Levi together because Jacob he kind of lumps them both together. He labels them as weapons of violence. He says, "Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel."
Now these are the two that their sister was raped.
Yes,
and they did the very imaginative tactic of getting your opponent to circumcise themselves, and then in the recovery period, destroy them. And then, I love the reply that they give, and maybe that this might be a failing of mine, or maybe this is righteous. But when Jacob says, "You've made me obnoxious to our neighbors," they said, "What were we supposed to do?" I mean, this is before "turn the other cheek" has been expressed by Christ. This is they raped our sister, they raped your daughter. What are we going to do? Just sit there and take it? No. There's something had to be done, and the act just meant his action. But he didn't like that, and I remember going back then he didn't like it then, and it sounds like he doesn't like it now when he's given his blessing.
Oh yeah, much like God inside the Old Testament, where we see he really, really takes his people to task. Thank God that we have grace, and we see that really poured out after the Last Supper with Jesus Christ and after his hanging on the cross, because we're not seeing the kind of discipline and or punishment carried out in our lives like we see inside the Old Testament. Now that grace exists for us and we have the freedom to go to God every single time we slip up, we have unbridled access, whereas they did not. And even up to this point, we don't even have the Levitical priests even positioned within Israel for them to even go and make atonement. You had a relationship with God, but it was largely to you doing your work to the fullest, living as one should, according to what was imparted to Adam and then carried down verbally throughout everybody up to this point in Israel's history. And you would make sacrifices of your first fruit. So he takes Levi and Simeon to task here. And Simeon, Levi, they both get dealt pretty harshly throughout the course of their life, save for Levi having an incredible blessing of being able to be the priesthood.
Yes.
And not just the priesthood for their own clan, but for all the other tribes. They don't inherit any land, but they do inherit 48 cities within the 12 tribes region, which is pretty cool because it's like you've got your finger in every single pie.
Right.
And if you're supposed to be the priest, then it only makes sense that you be in cities of prominence within all those different regions so that you're able to help keep people walking the line.
Right. Now, was Moses was a Levite or
Moses?
Or was it because Aaron?
I guess he would have been Levite because him and Aaron were brothers.
Because Aaron's a Levite. Yeah, right.
Yes.
And so that's what I think. I thought he was a Levite because Aaron was a Levite. And Aaron's, your first priest of the religion, right? of the faith. He's the first priest, and that, like you said, that's a pivotal thing, right?
It
And
really is, especially when you get into Leviticus, because you see a huge responsibility leveled on top of the Levites. And then secondary to that, you see a huge responsibility to the other tribes where it's like, hey, look, they're the ones who are going to be carrying, the tent that we're going to make. They're the ones who are going to be carrying all the instruments for the temple. They're the ones who are going to be ministering to the Lord and you on your behalf. So you all better protect them, even down to how they have to set up their camp, which is wild, which we're going to get to later as well. But jumping back into it, we go to Deuteronomy 33. And hold on, I think I spoke out of line before. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Yeah. So we're right. Deuteronomy 33, he speaks of Levi first. I'm going to end up taking what Moses says in Deuteronomy 33. It won't quite be in order because we're going to try and go tit for tat with Jacob. So anybody who's reading who's like, wait, he jumped backwards and forwards, that's why it's happening.
Yeah, Moses changes the lineup on when he redresses them versus Jacob, who does a better job remembering the order of the sons.
This is true. But Moses, he says of Levi, he says, give him the Thummim and the Urim. Those were two implements that were used by the high priest in interpreting the will of God. We're not quite sure exactly what they were. We do know that they had a breastpiece which had 12 colorful gemstones inside them, and the Urim was kept in the ephod of their ceremonial robes that they wore. Some people have wondered, did the gemstones light up in certain patterns, and that was how they could interpret the will of God? Is it possible that the Urim and the Thummim were a specific kind of lot that you would throw, and that then gave you God's will? We're really uncertain. But the high priest whose duty it was to wear said ephod with that breastplate, he was the one who did the ministering to God in the holiest of holies, and that was where he was speaking face to face with God through the smoke of a censer. So again, a lot of what's understood about that is lost to antiquity. Maybe the Vatican's got something inside their library that clears all that up for us, but we may never know. Anyway, he goes on and says, so give him the Thummim and the Urim. He says, they shall teach Jacob your rules and Israel your law. Okay, so big responsibility. Like these guys, hey, it's your duty to teach not just the rules, but the entirety of the law. They were to serve as priests, and they hated idolatry. References for that, if you want to chase those down, look up Exodus 32 and look up Deuteronomy 33 verses 9 and 10. Look up Malachi 2:14. They were also exempt from military duty, being that they were supposed to be administering in the temple duties and then ministering to the tribes. And they were subordinate to the sons of Aaron. So like you said before, we have Aaron, who is the first high priest. And then from them, his lineage, they're the Levitical priests. And the high priest had to be from the line of Aaron. You couldn't just have somebody step in who was outside of that, because they would be executed by God if they made it into the Holy of Holies without having that direct blood connection.
You're not supposed to be here.
Yeah, it's like, hey, so whoever said you could come in, you probably should have had them tie a cord around your foot, because you're about to see me in 3, 2, 1.
Yeah. You didn't double check your ancestry.com notes.
You should have swabbed a little better. But then jumping down to Simeon, we have a little bit more detailed into him. So Jacob, he says, detained by, this is the guy who was detained by Joseph in Egypt during that whole silver cup fiasco, where it's like, hey, do you have any other brothers? And they're like, no, he's the only one. And then, oh crap, we got a silver cup in his bag. After we brought him to you, our father's going to die. Simeon is the one who gets kept with Joseph. His numbers decreased in the wilderness when they were out wandering about. Reference for that to be Numbers 1 and 26. And he's divided in Jacob and scattered in Israel, unfortunately. What Moses says of him in Deuteronomy 33, he pronounced no blessing on Simeon's tribe at all. And thankfully, they didn't die off, though. there are 13 princes of Simeon that are actually recorded during the days of Hezekiah, and that's in First Chronicles 4. So though they had no further blessings spoken over them, they weren't completely wiped off the face of the earth, thankfully. Next up, we have Judah. And he says of Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Awesome. Judah is spoken of as being a lion's cub. Okay. We know Jesus, one of his monikers is the Lion of the tribe of Judah. He says, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff. And if we look into the lineage from Judah to Christ, we know that starting off with David, who was the king that God really wanted for Israel. From there, you have the city of David. Jesus Christ is known as the son of David. We're told that even David will reign with Jesus into eternity. So the scepter will never leave Judah's house. Up to this point, though, there has still been no king in Israel. We finally get Saul, and he wasn't God's chosen guy. So hence, that's why these.
I always go back to Saul was the example of what you were going to get, right? Because and this will branch off a little bit, but it's such a great passage to keep going back to in Samuel when it's like, the people didn't reject you, Samuel. They rejected me. And this is God talking to Samuel. They rejected me. And you can tell them that they can get a king like they want. All our friends have got, have this. Why can't we have a king too? You don't want a king because of X reasons. And so they pick a guy where Saul is the example of when it goes wrng and why you don't want a king. And, Saul, charismatic, a good guy at the beginning, but the moment gets too big for him. He flips and falls. And instead of doing what David does, where David, realizes his mistake and works past it to glorify God, to be better to God, with God and be closer with God, Saul goes the other way. He kind of just gives up and says, well, there's no way I'm really going to have redemption. I'm going to pay lip service to God because I still want to be blessed. But, I just feel like there's no way I'm going to be able to change myself. And I'm just going to just live this way. And that's, he really falls apart. It's a sad story, but
it is.
He doesn't really rule Israel. He's just there and does some good battles and everything. But, who really saves the day? It's David. When they're getting their tails kicked by the Philistines, David shows up as a child, as this descendant from Judah, the lowest of the order of sons, and doing one of the lowest most demeaning jobs was as a shepherd. He comes in and he just works these wonders. He's the wonder kid, and he is the wonder kid that if Jesus is going to preeminate anybody, it's going to be David. And I know the Jewish faith has their whole hang up that, since Joseph is not the father of Christ, that, that he's not actually for that. But I think the intention is there. I think that a smart and intelligent person can read between the lines of why was Joseph picked to be the earthly father of Christ. And no, you can't. I don't think you can sire a deity like that in that manner, because I don't know, that it makes more sense to me that it would happen the way that it did.
Yeah,
it's because we were raised this way, and this is the way the faith is. But it makes more sense that if you are part of God, you come from God. You don't come from Joseph. You don't come from Judah.
Yep.
But again, and I'm critical of Judah, but at the same time, I do like Judah because he stands up for it. When Jacob is having his moment of weakness, he does not want to go back. And poor Simeon, right? I guess we don't have Simeon anymore.
But he's dead to be sorry, boys.
I'm not sending Benjamin out for this, but Judah stands up. He's like, no, I'm gonna vouch for this. I'm gonna make this happen. We are gonna make this work. And and we need the food, right? We're gonna starve if we don't. So I'm gonna put my life on the line for Benjamin if it comes to that. And when the chips were down, Judah does that. So all the other stuff we talk about Jacob. Jacob's got all these faults that he has and things things that he does that we would find that are of somewhat ethical questionability,
Yeah.
or downright wrong. But when it comes to the important things, faith in God, does not argue with God. He's faithful to God. He's obedient to God. He's looking for guidance from God. He is a man who believes and is faithful to number one. And that's what it is. And Judah, again, chips are down. Judah have his indiscretions aside,
Yep.
does this. And to a degree, David follows in that path too. He has his indiscretions, but again, when the chips are down, David's loyal to number one, and that is not himself. Number one is God, and I think that's pretty telling. And if you're going to pick somebody who you're going to emulate, if we're talking about a Messiah who is going to bring about grace and salvation for all, why not come from a group who are flawed, who need grace because they continually screw up, but the faith is there. The faith is there. The loyalty is there, and the obedience for what they can throughout their personality flaws is there. They want to do better, and that's what Christ, I think, asks us to do.
Oh yeah, and like, even though David, if you look at his life, he screwed up bigger and badder than anybody ever. Like having one of your best friends killed, taking his wife, then taking another guy's wife while the dude's heart literally dies inside of him, and then he gets into such trouble. But it was the intent of his heart afterwards, when he realized his mistake. He was so repentant, and even though he kept screwing up again and again and again, he was so quick to recognize, crap, I stepped on a landmine, I've got to fix this.
Right. Like Job, never blamed God for anything. He took responsibility.
Oh, absolutely. And like, it's painful even when you see him admitting to some of the stuff inside the Psalms too, where it's like, yeah, I got out of pocket, and I guarantee you, it was no surprise to him why he endured some of the discipline that he did and some of the punishments that he did. But it was really, like you said, same about Job, is you never see him ever level any kind of railing accusation at God. It's always like, yep, I screwed up, I've got to do better.
Yeah. And what we see from David and Solomon too, his son, who has his own issues, but what do they do that Jesus wants all of us to do? It's early discipleship. What is Psalms? What is Proverbs? It's them offering this. This is what God wants you to do. This is what God thinks that you should do to succeed. This is part of obeying that covenant, is just these little things in life. And it's not leading people to Christ because the Jewish, or the Hebrews at that point, the Israelites at that time, they already are part of this covenant. They're already within that bubble, I guess. So they already know, but it's like, hey, this is what you need to do to keep the faith. This is what you need to do to keep the obedience. And the smart ones, or the faithful ones, will listen, and the other ones won't.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot of falling away. And I mean, even with that, you're going to see even some of the tribes of which you hear so many good things spoken of. With that, in them, you're going to have your dissenters, unfortunately. But jumping over to Deuteronomy 33, where Moses is now speaking of Judah, he says, "Hear, O Lord, the voice of Judah." More or less being like, hey, look, give him special attention, as it were. Bring him to his people, contend for him, help against his foes. Judah is taken care of. And you mentioned Saul being the first official king of Israel. And so many people, they're hang up with chapters of the Bible like Romans 13, where they try and say, oh, we were never supposed to have a king. Israel was never supposed to have one. Total falsity. It's laid out inside the book of Deuteronomy, and it's laid out even earlier, I want to say, in Exodus. The issue that arises when Samuel is like, or when he's telling Samuel, hey, they didn't reject you, they rejected me. It's not that God never wanted to give them a king. It's that he wanted his king to come from his lineage. And Saul was unfortunately the placeholder for that. But moving right along here, after Judah, we come to Zebulun. And Zebulun, of Jacob, he says, hey, he's going to dwell at the shore of the sea. He'll be a haven for ships, and his border shall be at Sidon. Nice little area that he ends up living in, and cool little port areas along there.
You're going to have a nice lake house, right?
Yeah, he's the vacation destination for all these guys. And I'll hit Issachar too, because Moses takes Issachar and Zebulun together. But Issachar. Jacob says he is a strong donkey or a strong ass. The Hebrew word for ass there is bony ass, which means it implies a very powerful beast of burden that is also very submissive to its master to get work done in exchange for being at peace, and to eventually, because he's working so hard, be able to lie under the trees in leisure while not working. They end up locating themselves in a very fertile part of the country. And unfortunately, they end up submitting to Canaanite invaders as they get beset by them when they head into Canaan. And instead of fighting against them, they literally allowed themselves to be taken as slaves, which sucks for Issachar. But it's not the end of the story. Moses in Deuteronomy 33 of Zebulun and Issachar, he says, rejoice in their going out and in their tents. Awesome. They'll call people to their mountain and make right sacrifices. All right, cool. Seems like they're, seems like they're at least going to, if they put their foot out of bounds, it's coming right back in. He says, they draw from the abundance of the seas and the hidden treasures of the sand. So on the one hand, it's like, cool. Is the abundance of the seas? Oh, they have no shortage of food because they're really super good at fishing. Or is it that that they end up having like a really great pearl trading? Because pearls and clams and oysters were seen as unclean to Israel and to the Jewish community. However, they were allowed to deal in pearls. So it's funny when you see Jesus talk about the pearl of great price, because for any Jewish person, like, that really doesn't mean a whole lot, save for when you understand what that pearl would mean to Jesus and the fact that they used to actually deal in pearls because they were very valuable to the Gentiles. And then from Issachar, there is kind of like the lingering question as to what happens with him. It seems that he goes from slavery into courageous action. So like I said, wasn't quite the end of the story with him, and we'll get into more of him later on.
It sounds like, he's your prototypical large workhorse guy who's very submissive, very slow to anger, but once he gets moving, watch out.
Yeah, he's the crock pot of the gang.
Right, and that makes sense because, like you said, this is what Issachar is, and then his people end up becoming, like you said, more interested in tilling the soil and being and working the fields than getting up and revolting like they would need to against the Canaanites. So what ends up happening is they end up being, subdued by them, I guess, or enslaved. But you can only push a man too far, right?
Yeah, very much. And we get to see a whole lot of smashing done in reverse when we get to the book of Joshua. And he wages his 7-year war campaign all throughout Canaan. And it's like tables totally turn at that point. And then even on into when you get into some of the major prophets, when they're recounting tales of what's actually going on, it's like, wow, these guys really end up not just taking each other to task, but they end up drawing on each other to help take all these other Canaanite tribes to task. And it's really, really cool when you get into some of those battles. Jumping onto the first of the sons to really, really take a dive for the worst is going to be Dan. He has what Jacob initially says over him. It seems like this is going to be that Dan's going to be in a position of preeminence. Because he says he shall judge his people. Okay, interesting. Maybe Dan's going to be the one who's supposed to hold everybody rigidly to the law, to God. But then he follows it up and he says he's going to be a serpent in the way. He shall be a serpent biting the horse's heels so that the riders fall backward off of. Dan, unfortunately, they gave themselves over to idolatry fairly quickly in Judges. And this is where they're seeking out a priest, essentially, and some household gods, some graven images, if you will. And the priest who they want, they're dead set on getting a Levite because they at least know that much. We got to have somebody from the Levitical priesthood to contend for us. So like, hey, you want to be our Levite? Awesome. The guy that they go to, he's already serving this other dude as his personal priest for his family. I believe I want to say he's got a wooden carving and a metal carving. These two graven gods, and they're like, "Oh shoot! Oh, you've already got the gods with you. Great. Well, why don't you come be our priest?" And so that Levite's like, "Yeah, all right, cool. We'll steal the gods. I'll go back with you." And a whole sordid affair ends up playing out. But as a result of that, Dan really, really slips up, and they won't be the only tribe of
No.
Israel that also falls to idolatry.
This Jacob's blessing prophecy, whatever you will call it, to Dan, really it really reminds me of the Pharisees when Jesus comes. Was we were talking about provide justice for his people, so we're looking at the people who are looking at the law, obeying the law, but a viper along the path, biting at the heels. They're supposed to be, doing what they're doing, looking out for their people, but doing it in the way that God intended, and not the way that benefits them or serves the hierarchy, and that the Pharisees seem to do, more in love with the law than in love with God and what God's intention is for other people. So Dan's, I would be very interested to see how many of the Pharisees are derivative from the Danites.
It would be interesting to go down that what's the word, family tree rabbit hole there, because I want to order one. It's poster size, but it is a family tree spanning the entire Bible, and it is gargantuan, but it's so cool to see where all those lines end up. I'm probably gonna just have to order one now. My birthday's coming up here real soon, so I'll probably just treat myself. But it's interesting what Moses ends up saying about Dan. When we jump back to Deuteronomy 33, he says, Dan is a lion's cub that leaps from Bashan. Now, following the events in Judges 18:30, where they go and they fall into idolatry and they get their Levite and their household gods, they actually go to live amongst some of the Canaanite tribes, or at least in regions that were directly bordering them. So Bashan, it'd be the Golan Heights nowadays.
Okay.
And we know that one of the essentially the king of the Rephaim was Og, king of Bashan, who's the one who's described as having a bed that was, depending on what cubit measurement you're using, anywhere between like 13 feet 5 inches up to 15 feet and a half. So he was potentially a very, very large Rephaim giant, or Nephilim giant. So Jesus even makes reference to Bashan. Yeah, I want to say it's in the book of Luke, when he's up on the cross. He says, "Behold, I am beset on all sides by the bulls of Bashan." Potentially that being in reference to very powerful demons in the area. And it's by no mistake that he says he's going to be a lion's cub that leaps from Bashan, because he does end up residing alongside these Canaanite tribes. It carries an evil connotation because of who he's essentially associating with. And then you tack on to that the fact that they're already in idolatry. It, as the Bible says, don't give the devil a foothold. Dan gave the devil way more than a foothold in that regard. Again, they were the first of the 12 tribes to descend into idolatry. They end up getting slided in the genealogies. When we look at the genealogies in Genesis 46:23 and Numbers 26, Dan's sons are completely omitted from inside there. Essentially, their names are blotted out in First Chronicles 1 through 10, blotted out. Revelation 7, they're blotted out as well.
Man.
They are also mentioned last when he's mentioned in Numbers 10, in Joshua 19, and First Chronicles 27. And there's two of the sons inside Dan's tribe, Hushan and Shusham. Their names are actually in place of, their names actually come out to be pit diggers. So they really get demoted, as it were.
You're going to be the ditch diggers.
Yeah, like, hey, go outside and kick rocks, you jerks.
This is what's going to happen to you if you're like the dad coming in. It's like, you're not doing anything except for just worshiping these false idols. You're going to grow up and dig ditches for a living. Not to say bad about people who work for a living, but that's what the communication is that, look, there are occupations that are looked down upon. Shepherds are one of them, which is what, but from these things we see great things bloom.
Oh
But
yes.
yeah, it does sound like, man, that there's some corruption there, and it is systemic in that tribe. The
Oh,
amount
it
of corruption
is.
that's going on there.
Oh yeah, and like what's so interesting too is, and you actually brought this up last time we were talking, but it's really interesting when you hear people talk nowadays, and they're like, how could they do such a thing after seeing all these incredible miracles that God's done for them? If I saw something like that, well, then I'd totally believe. And the response back is kind of like, you say that now, but we're dealing with, as God puts it, a stiff-necked people. And they literally saw the 9 plagues of Egypt carried out in front of their very eyes. They watched the Red Sea be split in 2. They had bread fall from heaven. They were up to their armpits in quail all around their tents. Like, they watched water come out of a rock twice. But yet, it's like they had the shortest short-term memories in the history of everybody. Because it was like as soon as they were, like a week or a couple of months out from that last great blessing, boom, we're right back into complaining. We're right back into, hey, let's melt down all the earrings and make a golden calf because clearly Moses is dead and we got to have something to worship.
It's been a few days. He's got to be dead. There's no chance.
It's like somebody sitting here with a watch and like, he's been gone 10 minutes. All right, guys, he's clearly dead. Where's that brazen serpent? Yeah, let's start offering homage to that thing now.
Well, God, you can credit him with all things, but he also is the preeminent being in the ultimate being in the universe. So he has access to that just unlimited power, which unlimited patience, as we see throughout the Old Testament and New and today. But Moses just being a dude, right, and just being the dude that he is, and dealing with that. Look, I've done these miracles. Look at what God's done for us. I don't deserve to be here, but he's picked me to do this and everything. And they come with, why didn't you just leave us in Egypt? We were better there. Now we're going to die. It's like,
I love Moses.
What have I been doing?
He's like, I didn't ask to be these people's leader. You gave them to me.
Yeah. I think there's at one point, he's like, just kill me. Just kill me and spare me from these people. It's too much. It's too much. And I'm sitting there reading. It's like, yes, I get it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And like, it's what's interesting too is under Moses's watch, we see thousands of people literally slain by God himself of Israel's tribes. And like, I get the feeling that Moses is sitting back half the time being like, I freaking told you. I told you this was going to happen.
He's like, it's like, how am I? It's herding cats, right? With all because they're all independent. They all want to just do their own thing. They all want to cry and whine about it. And again, this is a credit toward the Levites. He sticks with it, and Moses is given a monumental task. Of shepherding a lot. He has a lot on his shoulders. So when he finally does crack, spoiler alert to those of you who are reading along with me, spoiler alert, he is not a perfect being, and he eventually does crack, and he does do something he's not supposed to. It's not terrible, and God kind of punishes him, but at the same, you can look at that punishment 2 ways. It's like a lot of what God does is like what a dad does, what a dad does with the son, and a son that he knows is good and has done something wrong. He's like, hey, here's your punishment. But really this punishment, I might end up being a blessing to you. And where, look, you get to see everybody, but you don't, and Joshua, I love Joshua to death. Joshua goes in there. He's got his own problems to deal with because he's got to just pick up pieces from where Moses is. And where Moses is like, all right, you've got him this far. You've seen your mission done. You don't get to go into the promised land. You see your mission done. You are not going to enter. But you're coming up to heaven with me, right? And we get to watch and laugh, and you can go, ha, I'm so glad I don't have to deal with this, right? All I did was ask you to destroy everything and not take any of the goods. Joshua's probably sitting there like, how did Moses do this?
Oh my gosh, right? Well, and what's really cool too about Moses is when he does die, the Bible tells us that God himself actually buried his body. Like, what an honor. I mean, you had Enoch, who was taken up, the first to be raptured up to heaven, and you had Elijah later on, but like he literally like took Moses's body, and he's the one who put him to rest. Like that's really cool. And then you have, later on in the book of Jude, we found out that Michael the archangel actually contended with Satan over the body of Moses. For what reason? Not quite sure yet. But he might be one of the two witnesses at the end of the book there with maybe him and Elijah are coming back. Who knows?
I mean, I would, you get, like you said, the all-stars, right? You've got,
Mm-hmm.
I would say the all-stars, Moses, David.
Oh yeah,
probably Solomon's probably in there, though he doesn't. He's not as noteworthy, but he is so. He builds the temple, right?
Yeah,
he does, and he asks for wisdom. He'd like God is so. I mean, if God is able to be impressed, he is impressed by Solomon.
oh yeah,
and maybe throw Joseph and Daniel. I think would be big in there too. Like you think of the people who are going to be on the right hand side of God. So it's probably Abraham or Moses, or it's probably one of those two, maybe David. But I think David's. I don't think David rises to Moses or Abraham. So yeah, I would say it's probably one of those two.
If I had to hazard a guess, that's who I'm banking on.
Yeah. But that's what he's like you said, that's the favorite son. He's almost like the favorite son. He's like, look, I chose you for these people. I know you don't believe in yourself. I know you don't believe in yourself that much. I know that you're harder on yourself probably than anybody else.
Right.
But he's God loves that underdog. But I love this about you, and you did it. You broke that one time, but I love you to death. And you are so important to me that I'm setting you aside to the point, like you said, he buries him himself.
Yep.
You think about a figure that key. Of course, it's just like the demons. Demons were around when Christ was getting crucified. They wanted to be there. Absolutely. They wanted to see that suffering. That same thing. They wanted to see. They wanted to do whatever they could, probably to the body of Moses and everything, symbolically, whatever they could do to thumb their nose at God. Yep. And good on Michael if he's not having it.
Seriously, it makes me wonder, like, what was that fight like? Like that had to be incredible.
Yeah.
Hopefully, there's like a theater when we're on the other side.
I'm the same way as like, dude, there's so much I want to just know. It's like, look, I've got this idea in my head of what the Bible, what these accounts like. But I gotta see the movie, right? I gotta see it with all the special effects, especially when it's not like, hey, I've taken some liberties. No, this is what literally happened.
Oh man, it gives one chills thinking about it.
Oh man.
But jumping back in here with more of the sons, we go from Dan into Gad, and Jacob says of Gad, he says, "Hey, raiders, they shall raid Gad, but he shall raid at their heels." So like, all right, you might take your licks, but hey, you're gonna give as good as you get.
Yep.
Unfortunately, Gad was often raided by nations east of the Jordan, and the land that they lived in was still good land, though. It sucks that they had to get such a raw deal by getting raided so many times. But I want to say I believe with Gad, it was Gad, Reuben, and Manasseh. They're the ones who all settled to the east of the Jordan, and if we look at the Jordan by everything west of it being essentially land of Canaan, like flowing with milk and honey, they saw really good land on the way there. And so you get the whole thing where Reuben's like, hey, I'd like some of that land. And Moses is like, yeah, sure. When we're coming back through, you guys got to make sure and help us out when we're clearing out the territories here. But yeah, if you want to stay there, fine. Gad also raided by them, unfortunately. And we jump over to Moses here. Oh, sorry, still sticking with Jacob, what he speaks over them. We have, awesome, we got the map there, perfect.
Yeah.
So Gad is the direct brother of Asher by his mom Zilpah, and they were a fierce warlike tribe. The Bible describes them in 1 Chronicles 12 as having faces like the faces of lions. And to give you an idea of how strong and powerful these guys were, how warlike they were, it tells us that they were experienced with shield and spear. They were swift as gazelles. Elijah was actually of the tribe of Gad, which is pretty cool. And it says of their military prowess, the least of them was a match for 100 men, and the greatest was a match for 1,000. These are some badass dudes
Yeah.
when it comes to their military prowess, which is awesome.
And strategically speaking, that's who you want on that borderland when if you're talking about
honestly, yeah,
you've given them good land. Obviously, if they didn't, they wouldn't be such a target for raiding. But you say, who do you want? If they're going to be under attack, you want to put the people there who are going to be most equipped to fight back, and they're not going to get run over.
Yep. And it's like, I love that while Jacob says, hey, look, they're going to get raided, but they're going to be raiding right back on their heels. So it's almost like, oh, I took that. Well, hey, surprise. Come on, boys. Let's go get them. Yeah. Like, and so, thankfully, awesome blessing spoken over him. Then we have Moses' blessing in Deuteronomy. He says, blessed is he who enlarges Gad. Okay. He crouches like a lion. He tears off the arm and the scalp together. Chose the best land, because where they were as they're walking through, they're like, what, this is great here. We'll be good. Hey, best land came with the heads of the people. With Israel, he executed the justice of the Lord. So like Gad, walk in that line. He executed judgments for Israel. And again, they were bruisers.
Yeah, that's what he said. They're the I guess if you think of a Praetorian or the executioners, right, or the folks who are supposed to, if you're a Warhammer 40K fan, they're probably the Space Wolves.
There we go.
They're the folks who come in when the family order needs, they're the enforcers. They're the enforcers. That's what it is. That's what I was looking for. The enforcers of the tribes.
Or if it was the mob, they're the cleaners.
Yeah.
The sweepers. Then jumping right to his brother Asher, Jacob says of Asher, he says, Asher's food shall be rich. He shall yield royal delicacies. We know that the tribe, they settled along the rich northern coast of Canaan. They lived in a super, super fertile area, which is awesome. And they were faithful to the Mosaic priesthood, which is, like, on all accounts, awesome for them.
Probably pretty important if they're going to be preparing the food. It needs to be. They're going to be like the guys who are good with the delicacies.
Oh yeah, and
they need to be making it within the rules.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No cloven hooves, or one that doesn't chew the cud, which parts the hoof. So then, what Moses says of Asher, he says, "Most blessed of sons be Asher." Like, ooh, okay, all right, good blessing here already. Says, let him be the favorite of his brothers, and let him dip his foot in oil. Like, okay, so like, gonna be living the high life. Your bars or your shoes or your locks shall be iron and bronze, and as your days, so shall your strength or your leisurely walk be. So, all right, cool. Live in a fertile area, like you're gonna be strong. Like as long you're gonna have not just good days, but leisurely days. Okay, sweet.
So what? And now going into that, go back, because I think that there was a very positive translation of what Asher's name was. What does Asher's name translate to?
Asher's name. Jump back here real quick. Asher's name translates to happy, fortune, or luck.
Dang. I mean, right?
Yep. So check this out. So Asher, he settled in Mount Lebanon from Mount Lebanon to the Mediterranean, according to Joshua 19. What's interesting, when Jacob mentions royal delicacies, there's some cool speculation, and I'll chalk this up to Chuck Missler postulating this one, but I don't think he's wrong. Said royal delicacies could refer to material that was provided from that region to David and to Solomon for the building of the temple, and all the implements and the instruments that were supposed to be in there. References to check for that would be 2 Samuel 5 and 1 Kings 5. Asher also kept the Passover under King Hezekiah, in contrast to the other tribes, according to 2 Chronicles 30. And also according to Luke 2:36, the prophetess Anna is from the tribe of Asher, which is pretty cool too. So all good things all around spoken of Asher on both sides. Like him and his brother seem to have both walked that awesome line.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Look, what are the things we want to be? We want to fight well. We want to eat well.
Yeah. Hey, we got you guys covered. We're building the temple. We're here.
An army moves on its stomach. That's an old
Very true.
saying.
We even see Jonathan. Hey, look, Father, I ate this honey. The light has come back to my eyes. Would that we could have eaten instead of waiting to the end of this miserable tirade. Jumping to Naphtali. Of Naphtali, Jacob says, Naphtali is a doe let loose that bears beautiful fawns. Ooh, all right, cool. Was the fifth son of Jacob and the second of the handmaid Bilhah. He was the full brother to Dan. His name meaning wrestlings of God. Okay, wrestlings of God. He ends up, north and northwest of the Sea of Galilee in the area that would be Capernaum, Bethsaida, and Chorazin or Chorazin. And
right next to Asher.
Yep, where those cities lie, that was his region there. So again, pretty cool region there. And he's alongside Asher, who if Asher's getting all these crazy blessings, like a good one to be right alongside of. Then we have Moses' pronouncement over Naphtali in Deuteronomy. He says, "Oh, Naphtali, sated with flavor and full of the blessings of the Lord, possesses the lake, west, and the south." Another just kind of straightforward, real simple one there. We jump back. Let's see what Naphtali's name means. Naphtali, wrestling or struggling. Okay, I guess it was worth the struggle and worth the wrestle. After Naphtali, we go into Joseph, the one who gets the huge chunks.
The big chunks.
Oh, yeah. So,
oh, wait, there it is.
Of Joseph, Jacob says, he's a fruitful bough by a spring. His branches run over the wall like so bountiful. Man, you're just invading the neighbor now. He was bitterly attacked in more ways than one because we saw him go into slavery. He was first thrown into a pit, then sold into slavery, then sold to Potiphar, then into prison, then forgotten about for years, and then finally brought up to where he needed to be. Wild life that he had and blessed tremendously for it. He was bitterly attacked in more ways than one, yet his bow remained unmoved. His arms made agile by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob. God, lavished upon more than any other brother. Yep. He has blessings in every aspect of his life. Super awesome. And his name means, may he, God, add sons, according to Genesis 30. Moses speaks over Joseph. He says, blessed by the Lord, or blessed by the Lord, be his land with the choicest gifts of heaven above and of the deep that crouches beneath, with the finest fruits of the sun and the rich yield of the months, with the finest produce of the ancient mountains and the abundance of the everlasting hills, with the best gifts of the earth and its fullness and the flavor of him who dwells in the bush. I believe when he says flavor of him who dwells in the bush, I want to say that's in reference to the burning bush, but don't quote me on that. I've got more research to do there. These blessings rest upon his head. He has majesty. He'll gore the people with his horns to the ends of the earth. 10,000s of Ephraim, who was the younger son, thousands of Manasseh, who was the older son. Pretty awesome on his face there. We know that he was the firstborn of Rachel, Jacob's loved wife, according to Genesis 30, 22 through 24. If you look at his life in just simple one-word terms, first he was favored, then he was despised, then he was sold, then he was exalted, according to Genesis 37 all the way through 50. There's Chuck Missler, again, was one who was a cool proponent of this, and some of them are a stretch. But I believe there's a book that was written which compares Joseph to Christ as kind of a model or a type of Christ in over 100 different ways. I haven't read it yet, but I want to check out the list and see where all the ends meet. Because I would imagine that there's probably a number of them that are pretty spot on.
That was always what kind of confused me because, just thinking about it, it's like if the lineage is going to go from Abraham to Christ, and everything starts to split up at Jacob or Jacob's sons, you would think it would be Joseph that would have the line that would go to David and go to Jesus, but it isn't. But I mean, I guess Jesus's father's name is Joseph. I think that's poetic.
Yeah.
In its way, but you think of like who was the greatest among his sons. It's Joseph, no question about it. He is the pious one. He is blessed with gifts. He takes the best advantage of it, and yet he struggles with other people accepting him because he's blessed. He's charismatic to a degree, but everybody seems to be envious of him because he always seems to be landing on his feet. But a lot of that is through either him counting his blessings or just his faith, just his faith in general, doing the right thing when other people wouldn't.
Hey, what does it say? The furnace for gold, the crucible for silver, and God tests the heart. Joseph was definitely put through the crucible for sure, but I feel like that really, because he struck me as really kind of naive in the beginning there, like when he's telling his brothers, "Oh yeah, dudes, we had sheaves of wheat, yours all bowed to mine." Then like the sun and the moon, they were like, "Whoa, Joseph's the bomb," and his brothers are like, "Oh, you freaking
get low this guy! Look this guy over here telling us
this little moof, go back home, ya hump. Wear your stupid colored jacket over there." Like
kick him into the well. Yeah, I mean, it was just like and from what I understand, just a brief bit of research I've done on Joseph, that the Jewish faith has two schools of thought on that, and one school of thought is that Joseph really was kind of full of himself, and that his experiences in Egypt and everything was a way of humbling him, which is, I don't know how true that is. I take more of the approach that he was the naive one. But it's plausible that someone would act like that because he is a bit spoiled. Maybe he was a bit of a spoiled guy, but I feel like it lines up better that he's just naive. He's just naive because he doesn't know any better, because he just assumes that everybody else is blessed, and they all are. Jacob's is incredibly rich. He's incredibly well off, and all these guys are just taking different portions of it, but as much as they're blessed, somebody else is blessed more.
Yep.
Look,
and with Joseph even too, like I want to say that the trials he got put through, they probably taught him what to and what not to say. And they probably also taught him like, hey, read the room, bro. Like, like have a bit of decorum about yourself, but also like you're allowed to not say everything that just flits through your mind.
You mean you mean like when you're interpreting a dream and he's like, "Oh, do me." Oh, you're gonna die, dude.
He's like, uh-oh.
Oh yeah. Oh, you're gonna die. That's your dream.
Tough break, dude. I've got to go run this prison because I'm in charge now, even though I'm a prisoner still. Like,
yeah,
how amazing
should have been like, hey, let me talk to each of y'all individually before I do this, because these don't always go the way that everybody thinks they're gonna go.
Probably the guy's like, I had a dream too. These birds ate the bread. Like, hey, can you come over here for a second? Yeah. So like 3 days. Like, I'm so sorry, man. Like, make your peace, okay? But from Joseph, we have his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. Ephraim being the second, Manasseh being the first. And as I mentioned before, Jacob directly adopts those two sons as his own sons. So Genesis 41, we see, as I said, adopted by Jacob, blessed. Ephraim is blessed before Manasseh in Genesis 48. Sorry, not 48, 49. And he ends up, I guess, leading his tribe of the northern kingdom of Israel, according to Isaiah 7 and Jeremiah 31. Now, Manasseh, his name means making to forget. Okay. First son of Joseph, and Asenath, his Egyptian wife, according to Genesis 41 and Genesis 46. Adopted also by Jacob, according to Genesis 48. And his tribe is known for its valor. Really cool. From Manasseh, we have some pretty heavy hitters. We have Gideon, who we see in Judges 6. We also have Jephthah, who comes to save the day in Judges 11. Jephthah also makes a tragic vow which costs the life of his daughter. Really, really sucks for Jephthah.
To me, that's the saddest story in the Old Testament.
That's
Job's tragedies aside, it's just to me, it's a story of warning where, it's don't just assume
Yep.
that you can just don't play loose your um
Your
with your
vows and
promises to God,
oaths.
because
Yep.
you don't know what you're doing. And his daughter, man, you talk about taking that in stride. She did.
Dude, that sucks. Because what's really interesting is nowhere in the Bible does God say that we have to swear an oath. But if you do swear an oath, he's going to hold you to it.
And it doesn't even sound like, and correct me if I'm wrong, he doesn't even say that he has to go through with it. Jephthah just says, I made this promise.
Yep.
We're going to do it. And,
Yep.
God doesn't say God doesn't say, yep, you need to make sure you do it. But because that's what I said, that's the closest that God gets there, or that the Bible gets to human sacrifice.
Yep.
To me, because it was not at God's command. It was just somebody following through on something they said they would do.
Yep. And that's so tough. So tough. My heart breaks for that. But interesting thing about the two sons, because this is where you'll end up hearing throughout scripture referred to a lot, the half tribe of Manasseh, the half tribe of Manasseh. So officially here, if we're counting Joseph as one tribe, okay, cool. We have our 12 tribes. But then through Ephraim and Manasseh, it's like we have 14. So later on, when we get to Revelation, we see 2 that are missing. We're still left with 12. So you're able to kind of play with the numbers a bit.
Right.
And of the half tribe of the 2 half tribes of Joseph, Manasseh, and Ephraim, we have one half goes east of the Jordan, according to Numbers 32 and 39. And then we have one tribe that goes west of the Jordan, according to Joshua 16 and 17. So interesting how they decided, hey, I'll take this side, you take that side, and I guess this is where we stay. It's also really super interesting what happens to them as we get into the books of Kings and Chronicles. Now jumping into the final son, Benjamin.
Interestingly placed in Israel too.
Yeah, actually, between the shoulders, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
Benjamin, Jacob says of him, is a ravenous wolf. In the morning, devouring the prey, and at evening, dividing the spoil. Now, the Old English word that ravenous stems from is the word raven, which means to prey with rapacity or aggressive greed, which this name also speaks of cruelty. The tribe, though, however, was full of highly skilled warriors, and that's where Saul, he comes from. He is also a Benjamite. Moses, speaking over Benjamin, says, the beloved of the Lord dwells in safety. All right, starting off good. The high God surrounds him all day long and dwells between his shoulders. Now, this is really cool. The area that Benjamin is really small, but it is the part that Jerusalem sits in. The boundary there is the Tyropoeon Valley. Now, technically, the part of Israel that is Mount Zion is in Benjamin. It's not in Judah like a lot of people think. And then you have the Mount Olives, which we'll call is essentially the Kidron Valley. We've got Mount of Olives, and then we have Mount Zion. They'll call those the shoulders. Benjamin resides directly between them in the Mount Moriah region, topologically. So, kind of cool that he's spoken of as residing between the shoulders inside his blessings. Benjamin, we know, is the youngest son of Jacob. He's called the son of the right hand by Jacob. He's known as ferocious in Judges 19, 2 Samuel 2 and 16, 1 Chronicles 8, 12, 2 Chronicles 17. From Benjamin also come some real big heroes of note. We see Ehud. He is the judge that God raises up to save Israel from the Moabites. And he's the one who takes essentially a 2-foot-long dagger strapped to his leg and stabs the really super fat king.
Oh, yeah. That's another great scene. That's another great.
I would love to see a movie built around judges. That would be cool to see.
That's why I always said you can't trust Hollywood at all. And you can't trust HBO. But if you see the treatment, and this is me talking as a Tolkien fan as well,
Okay,
who
sure.
was on pins and needles waiting to see how they, you read the Silmarillion, and you're like, man, this blows Game of Thrones away. There's just so much content there.
Oh my gosh,
But you
right?
could see if somebody gave the cinematic treatment to the Old Testament in general, right? You could do so much with it to
Gosh.
promote because, like I said, and sometimes it's viewed as a criticism, or hey, Stuart, you live so much in the Old Testament as a Christian. It's like, yeah, but that's where you build your fundamentals. That's where all the fundamentals are. That's
Yep.
where Jesus comes and reaffirms so much. He establishes a new covenant, but it's all based on what happened before. That's where the prophecy is for. Everything's building up basically from Noah or Abraham, depending on where you want to start. It's all leading up to Christ, right? And then Christ is that's the biggest, that's the childhood of humanity, right? We're learning, and God is guiding us and very strictly, when Christ is going out now it's here. You guys are going to be much more on your own. You're going to be much more free, but you're going to have the responsibility of faith. I'm not going to be doing these direct things. I'm not going to be speaking down and coming to you the way that I've come to these prophets, or I've come to your kings.
Mm-hmm.
Now salvation is for everybody. We're doing this great cleansing. This is what this is. And that's great, but again, and I don't want it to sound like a criticism, but it often comes across of it. It's like, if you've got the Old Testament, which is your fundamentals, then Christ coming and preaching, and that's the big meat of the New Testament. And then after that, it's mostly Paul and and some other folks and everything establishing the church and basically it's trying to establish how the church and how do we need to behave to be better examples, to live life the way Christ wanted us. It's kind of like, all right, Christ has come and done this great thing for us. Where do we go from here? And that's where the rest of the New Testament is until you get to Revelation. It's a whole different bag. It's just this whole thing. But that's the majority of it. Jesus, where do we go from here now? And this is, with divine inspiration, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But at the end, it's not the narrative. It's not the history that the Old Testament is. It's much more instructional. To me, it's a lot like it can be a lot like Leviticus in some instances. Whereas you don't have New Testament volumes like Kings or Jonah or Job. It's much different.
Yeah, and the epistles are really super cool too, because you get to see kind of a finer point put on the idea of serving God or letting your work be an act of worship to God. And you really see it boil down to a simple idea of further God's family and build community. And if you want to try and simplify what the actual Christian message or what your overarching goal of being a Christian is, like, that's really it.
Yeah.
Bolster God's family and forge community. And you have, of course, the spiritual aspect of everything. But it's cool to see here inside the Old Testament a lot of just like you were kind of saying, the building blocks. Like, hey, these are the do's and the don'ts that they had to deal with. And these are a lot of the ritualistic things, according to those 613 Mosaic laws that they had to contend with. It's really cool to see that codified in Jesus Christ, where he says, not a single jot or tittle will pass from the law, essentially until the end. Like, don't think that I came to abolish it. No, I came to confirm this law.
Confirm it, yeah.
And it's really cool when you see that light bulb click on for people and they realize, oh, okay, got it. I don't have to overcomplicate this anymore. I can literally I can abide inside the New Testament, but I can get all that good foundation from the Old Testament too, instead of trying to do the progressive Christian thing and say, oh yeah, New Testament makes the Old Testament irrelevant.
You just need to be nice to people, right?
Just be a red letter Christian. No, for the birds.
And what does Jesus do at like the whole thing when he's given the parables, when he's talking to the Pharisees? He's not saying, no, you were doing it this way, but we're doing it different now. He's like, no, look at how far y'all have fallen from where y'all were supposed to be when Moses left. those commandments, when he made that covenant, when Abraham made the covenant and Moses reaffirmed it, and it was put on the tablets and the Mosaic laws and everything. And when y'all started at that point, look at where y'all have come, where y'all have become so in love with the laws.
Yep.
That y'all have lost y'all's soul in
lost
it.
the
I'm here
passion.
to remind you that you have a soul and that you need to live in that. And it's not the laws are there to help you be people, not to subjugate people under a law. It's one's not supposed. Once they had it backwards, and he's like, "This is how far we've come."
Yep.
And I mean, I have a friend of mine. I haven't talked to him in a while, but he was an intern at our church.
Okay.
And he spoke a couple times. He was very much a follow the Mosaic law. He still observed the food rules of Jewish culture. And so like when we would go out to lunch to go to Buffalo Wild Wings so to get the chicken. So because he wouldn't eat the stuff that wasn't, because he was very much he took that very seriously and very literally, which, more power to him, that Christ, I'm here to affirm the law. I'm here to affirm the law. But again, now there's a whole new aspect of it with the grace and I am taking your sin on myself, and I am that perfect sacrificial best of the best lamb being offered up as a sin offering here. That's so much so that my offering equals all the sin of the entire world that will ever happen.
Yep.
Because I am God, right? I am however you try to view the Son of God, or the Trinity, or however it makes sense in your head that Jesus represents. He's God, right? And it's and now I've lived this perfect life. I've shown you how it's done. Good luck trying to follow in my footsteps. Try your best.
Right.
Now I am blemish free, and here I am as just offering up myself. I forget where I was going with this.
Right. Maybe this might jog you. I forget which pastor said this. Chuck Missler actually, he reiterated it though. He says, thank God Christianity is not a works-based belief structure. It says you have people that say, oh yeah, there's many ways up the mountain. No, there's only one. But I suppose, for the sake of argument, we could say, sure, there's another way which is works-based. So what you have to do from the day you're born to the day you die, you have to do every single thing correct. Never put a foot out of bounds, never speak in malice, never make a single mistake. You live a perfect life. Yeah. Then when you die and you get up to heaven, you say to Jesus, okay, cool, move over. There's two of us.
Yeah, well, exactly. And while I think it's important to have an emphasis on works, because I think that by doing works, you put yourself in that right mind frame.
Yep.
I think it's dangerous to kind of put that in there, because now you're starting to put conditions on salvation that is not, that don't necessarily feel like they're there. It's things that we should be doing and we should be working towards, like, looking out for the widows and the orphans and doing these things and loving our fellow man and being the good Samaritan on the side of the road, helping. These are works that we do, but those are coming from a heart that's Christ-like, right?
Correct.
And that's us emphasizing, or that it's a product. It's a product of who we already are being, as opposed to, I'm doing this on the condition that I get into heaven. I feel like this is my personal opinion. I don't feel like that's putting your head in the right space. You should be putting your head in the right spaces. I'm not worthy, but I've been given this gift and I need to do the best with it.
Yep.
And you go from that point, and then the works kind of come from there, because you feel it in your heart.
Exactly, because we're justified by our faith in Jesus Christ and our remittance of sins unto Him. The works, that's what secures our gifts in heaven. So, like, when people say, when they try and say, oh, it's not a works base, well, there's a works component, but like you already said, the works is the confirmation of your faith, which just says, hey,
Yeah.
look, faith without works is dead. So yes, you've been saved by grace and by your faith, but you get to then lay up your treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys. And that's through showing just who lives inside you, and that goodness that's inside you, you want to share with everybody else.
It's a byproduct of
Yes.
your faith.
Good word.
Like I'll exercise to be healthy, and then the muscle and the lean looks and everything that comes with it is a byproduct of that. Much like the
Yep.
works is just that's just part of the thing. And
Yeah,
I
because
don't.
that's the fruit that you're producing, because like we're not called to be gift inspectors, we're called to be fruit inspectors. So it's like, give me a reason for the hope that is inside your heart. Like, what does that look like? Because if it's just you going to mass twice a week, doing your 9 Hail Marys, your 2 Our Fathers, and then living like a douchebag the entire rest of the week, like,
Yeah.
are you essentially just a crino? Are you a Christian in name only? Like, what
Yeah.
is this?
And that's the thing, and that puts us in that sets us up for probably the biggest problem internally within the church is the congregation or the community of Christians who look at, I'm here, and now I'm looking down at the people who aren't as much as me, and every comparing. And I think that works. It might work for people. I don't want to come down too hard on people, because if it's getting them to where they need to be, right? But I feel like trying to center things or to base the faith off of works is not where we should be, because I think it puts us in a bad space where we end up being like the Pharisees, which in some aspects within the RCC, and they're not alone, because we've got the problems within the other denominations, where you get those aspects of kind of pharisaical work. And we're all, I think the Christians with the good heart who are fighting the good fight, we're all we're contending with. We're so off topic right now, but we're
Hey, it's all
contending
right.
with.
It's all good.
We're contending with that. At the same time, we're contending with the fact that that's pushing people away, that society and the media and culture is trying to push people away, and people are lazy and or just despondent, or just depressed, or whatever, that we're set us upon by so many sides, these ways that are pushing people in, but we want to gather as much of them to us. And it feels like that's why I said a workspace thing ends up. There's just so many problems, I think, that derives from it. And you can add to the fact that something that used to happen a lot is, you've had a lot of misfortune in your life, you must have done a lot to tick God off,
Right?
which is wrong.
Yeah,
Don't do that. But I feel like that's if it's not derivative of workspace, I feel like it's aligned with it somehow. Because it just feels like, oh well, you're not doing the right thing. And that's why your life is so terrible. And
it's like of course there's consequences, good and bad, for everything that we do, and we know that while God disciplines sin in our temporal life, it is punished eternally if you don't come to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. And the works that, like you were mentioning, the works being a byproduct of the faith that's inside of you, like essentially that's your reaffirming daily to anybody who would look onto you and see the witness that your life is supposed to be, that hey, there's more on the inside of here than just what I espouse when I go into church on Sunday. Because I forget who said it, but I love the quote, and it's the greatest single cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who confess God with their mouth but then walk out the door and deny him with their lifestyle.
Oh,
and
who's saying Jesus Freak?
That was DC Talk.
DC Talk. I remember that was part of one of their songs on their album, and I think they were quoting somebody. I don't think it was them, but I always remember that part in the song.
I don't know why.
What If I Stumble? I think it was What If I Stumble. It was the song that they did, but
it wasn't Herman Spencer, was it? That might have been Herman Spencer. I think it was Herman Spencer who said that.
Look, Brian coming out of nowhere. The one, our first comment of the night, Robin comes. What If I Stumble was the song. Yes. Yep. That was the first rock I ever heard. I didn't know that there was anything other than him, and I'm a guy who lives in the hymns. But
sure,
that was the first rock song, Jesus Freak, and then my friend had the album, and I heard it. I was like, oh, this is really cool, because like this is like mid-90s, like I'm in middle school, high school area, and I was like, I didn't know people actually sang Christian songs like this.
Right? Let alone Christian rap.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's right. Because yeah.
Oh yeah. But actually, now because you brought up the New Testament, the epistles. What's interesting too is like if we go into some of the heroes of note beyond Ehud inside the tribe of Benjamin, we have I already mentioned Saul, and then Jonathan as a byproduct. We have Queen Esther, but then we actually have the Apostle Paul, who was also from the tribe of Benjamin, and he was the one who was the most devout to the letter Pharisee that ever lived. And it's so amazing when you read through Romans, which we're definitely going to have several conversations on that one. But when you read
Oh
through
yeah.
Romans and you realize that he was ravaging the church, a lot of people will say, "Hey, Saint Paul was a murderer. He breathed murderous intent at all these people," and he's one who was justified by his faith. And if he's one who's because he is one who stressed, like, look, you're justified by your faith. And then James says, and you secure your rewards with your works. If we have Paul here going, thank God grace exists, then that should be a huge just blinker to the rest of us saying,
Oh yeah.
there is no way you're getting through those doors just on your good actions alone. If your heart is not aligned with Jesus Christ, do all the works in the world you want. It means nothing at the end of the day. And James pretty much echoes the same thing in telling us how we secure our heavenly rewards. Not that eternal life isn't a reward in and of itself, but I guess I don't know, maybe one mansion has finials, maybe the next one has crown molding. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's what I think, because Paul for me is the heart. Like I relate so much to Peter. Paul, on the other hand, I have so much difficulty getting into him. His writings, they just don't speak to me the way that so many people get a lot out of it. Just
Sure.
I struggle with it. And but at the same time, he is because if we say the Bible is a giant story of redemption, Paul is the perfect guy to be wrapping all that up. Look at all I did that was wrong. Because we go from the climax, which is Jesus dying and then rising, in the middle of there, you have the thief on the cross, which I think is one of the most poignant pieces in the Bible. And it's just so amazing. But you've got Paul there at the end. He's just, he's just this terrible dude, right? He's the Darth Vader, right? It's if you want to use the Star Wars reference, he's Darth Vader just rolling around. He's wiping out folks. He's having people stoned, and he's the tip of the spear for the Pharisees, and he ends up becoming the tip of the spear for early Christianity. And how great, and all this because it's Jesus. It's like that I can switch you if I think that because all the talents that Paul had were near divine, just being used for wrong. And I guess Jesus saw in Paul that his heart was just in the wrong place, but the
passion was there. The heart was misdirected. And it's a wonder that he comes from, the tribe of Benjamin, because they're known as being super ferocious. This is a tribe that, according to Judges 3, they had like the best stone slingers, guys who slung stones left-handed, who were like crazy accurate. And they had hundreds of these dudes. It really is cool. And we'll definitely have to devote like a whole conversation to what then happens with the tribes when we get to the New Testament and then into Revelation, because it is not without any mistake whatsoever that we see what Jacob says, what Moses says, and then what's laid out for us at like in Revelation 7 when we see those 144,000 sealed. And it's by no mistake that Jacob literally waited to give up the ghost. He waited until he got all these blessings pronounced over his sons before he finally did. Because it says after commanding his sons, he pulled up his feet, essentially reclined back in his bed, gave up the ghost, died, and was gathered to his people.
Yeah.
It's really, really interesting too. If and this would be a great study that I'm going to be undertaking here in short order, but it's a good study also for anybody who just wants to see what happens periodically, just checking in with the tribes. Because they're listed, the 12 tribes in total are listed 20 times in scripture. They're listed in Genesis 29 and 35, and that was, their origin, that was
Right.
their natural order of Jacob's 12 sons. Then we have
Right.
them showing up in Genesis 46, Genesis 49, that's the entering of Egypt, and then Jacob's prophetic blessings, like we just read through. They show up in Exodus 1, they show up in Numbers 1, twice actually in Numbers 1. Then they show up in Numbers 2, 7, 10, 13, 26, 34, where we see the dividing of the land happening. They show up in Deuteronomy 27 and 33. Then they're in Joshua 13, 22, Judges 5, 1 Chronicles 2, 1 Chronicles 12, and then finally in Ezekiel 48. And then we see them end all in Revelation 7. What's really cool, though, so we mentioned their names before, and their names end up getting put in a different order when you actually get into Revelation. Instead of them being by birth order, when we first saw them, and when we first get into the 12 tribes having their blessings spoken over them by Jacob, that we have, of course, Dan is excluded, Ephraim is excluded, because those are the two tribes that gave themselves over to idolatry. But the order of the tribes inside Revelation 7, it goes Judah, Reuben, Gad, Asher, Naphtali, Manasseh, Simeon, Levi, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and then Benjamin. And I encourage everybody, consider anytime we have a talk, the Gauntlet of the Berean Challenge is thrown down. Born of Acts 17:11 encourages you to not take anything that I or Stuart say as the gospel, but search the stuff out on your own and see if what you have heard is true. This is a list put together. Again, this comes from Chuck Misser. I pretty much got to give this whole thing to him on this section here, and a large chunk of what I've shared tonight. But this one here, if you look up what is spoken about each individual son as they're born, because with every, it's kind of like with Eve when she has her sons Cain and Abel, and then when she has Seth, there's something spoken over each one of them as they're born. The same thing happens as we have the sons that are born to Jacob. The first time we have Reuben, because the Lord has looked upon my affliction, for now my husband will love me. That was what Leah said. Then we have for Simeon, because the Lord has heard that I am hated, he has given me this son also. Okay. Then we go to Levi. Now this time my husband will be attracted to me because I have borne him 3 sons. Go to Judah. This time I will praise the Lord. Okay. Then we move on to Bilhah. This is what Rachel says after Bilhah gives birth to Dan. God has judged me and has also heard my voice and given me a son. Naphtali. With mighty wrestlings, I have wrestled with my sister and have prevailed. And these also tie directly into what their names are actually, what they actually mean. Then we go to Zilpah with Gad. Good fortune has come. Then Asher. Happy am I, for women have called me happy. Then we get to Issachar. God has given me my wages because I gave my servant to my husband. Then we go to Dinah. Then we go to Zebulun. God has endowed me with a good endowment. Now my husband will honor me because I have borne him 6 sons. Then we go to Joseph. God has taken away my reproach. And then we have Benjamin, where we know he is the son of his right hand. So this here put together by Chuck, some of it is probably going to be a stretch, but I don't think it's too far off. If you look at the meanings of their names, you look at what's said about them by their family, by either their father or their mothers, and you take the order that they are listed inside the book of Revelation. This is what is spoken about them and their names. If you read it all out in that same order, what it reads. We have Judah, praise the Lord. Reuben, he has looked on my affliction. And Gad, granted good fortune. Asher, happy am I. Naphtali, my wrestling. Manasseh has made me forget my sorrow. Simeon, God hears me. Levi has joined me. Issachar, purchased me. And Zebulun exalted me. By Joseph, adding to me Benjamin, the son of his right hand.
That's amazing.
Not wild?
That's That's amazing. But
Once let me go one more through, just top to bottom, just straight through. Praise the Lord. He has looked on my affliction and granted good fortune. Happy am I. My wrestling has made me forget my sorrow. God hears me, has joined me, purchased me, and exalted me by adding to me the son of his right hand. Like,
yeah,
it's so cool. Nothing is in here by mistake whatsoever.
it's I'm speechless about it, and this is not something that happens to me a lot, right? I've always have something to say, but how amazing is that? Because like I said, the thing that's always floored me is the most prophetic thing that you see with, Abraham's two sons. Isaac, one's goes one way and one goes the other way, and he says at the beginning, he says, y'all are not going to be, y'all's descendants are not going to be friendly to each other. And we see in current events, they're not. And you can look at that as it's like, look, if you're looking for just a fraction of divinity there, it's right there. And that's in the first book of the Bible.
Yep.
It starts off, and then you put together things like that. And that's incredible.
It's all like, as much as people want to try and say, because there are still those lunatics out there who will say, oh, the Bible's a bunch of man-made contrived nonsense. You cannot look at this and tell me that a bunch of rabbis got together thousands of years ago and contrived to put all this together. They've done equations to see, okay, if we just go with the idea that in randomness these words could be put together. It was like, if you took, I want to say, because people will say, oh, if you put enough monkeys together in a room with typewriters, eventually they'll come up with Shakespeare.
Yeah.
With the specificity and the degree of accuracy that we see inside the Old Testament, some of the prophecies, all throughout the events that take place, all the names, the punctuation marks, the dates, the places that they go, all the way to the New Testament, it would take something like 300 supercomputers over 300 billion years to be able to come even close to putting together some of what I guess people would call a biblical code. It's just like the ability that somebody would have to, at random, get the Bible to line up with all the places, names, and dates, and then have the meanings behind those names and dates somehow be cogent. It's literally an impossibility, which means this entire thing was planned. Like, and here's one more cool name thing for you. If you look up through the first, I want to say it's the first 10 names from Adam's lineage all the way to Noah. We have Adam, who begat Seth. Then we have Enosh, Canaan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, and Noah. Adam's name means man. Seth's name, appointed. Enosh, mortal. Canaan, sorrow. Mahalalel, the blessed God. Jared, shall come down. Enoch, teaching. Methuselah, his death shall bring. Lamech, the despairing. Noah, rest or comfort. In order, man appointed mortal sorrow. The blessed God shall come down, teaching. His death shall bring the despairing rest or comfort. No way a bunch of rabbis just sat around and try and contrive this. Like, this is built into here. This is the fingerprints of the creator himself.
It's divinely inspired.
Absolutely. And I know we're kind of coming to the end of our time here. I figure I've got time for probably one more cool little chunk we can add to this. And I'm gonna say that we save the Revelation stuff for next time around.
Yeah,
because
anytime you try to touch on Revelation, you gotta carve out your own time to it.
Oh,
it ends up becoming, that's the rabbit hole of rabbit holes.
It seriously is. And like, it's amazing too, because with Revelation, you always have to bring in the book of Daniel and the 70th week of Daniel, because there's so much inside there that is directly connected to the 12 tribes. So I mentioned the camp of Israel before. There was very, very specific details laid out for the camp of Israel in what order that they were supposed to be in and how that was supposed to relate to the central camp, which was supposed to be the camp of the Levites. And if you look to numbers 2, that's where we kind of get our camping orders from. So of the camps that were there, there's 4 main camps. You have the camp of Dan, the camp of Reuben, the camp of Ephraim, and the camp of Judah. Now, within Dan's camp, you have Naphtali, Asher, and Dan. In Reuben's, we have Gad, Simeon, Reuben. Ephraim, we have Benjamin, Manasseh, and Ephraim. And then Judah, we have Zebulun, Issachar, and Judah. So they're those 3 names of each. They all make up their one individual camp. So the way the camps were laid out, the center of it, that's where the Levites resided. And that's where they had the tent of meeting. And then they had the holiest of holies in the center of all that. So if we're looking, if we're going, say, you almost have to look at it as though instead of seeing a normal compass where north is up and south is down, turn it 1 to your right. So north would be where east is, south would be where west is. So we have the Levites to the top of that. So in the Levites camp, we've got the Gershonites who are at the upper area. To the right of that, we have the Merarites. Across from them, we have the Kohathites. And then below that, we have Moses and the priests. Now, Judah, the lion, he's supposed to be camping in the east. So we have him. The total of the tribes, when the first census was taken, from Judah's camp, we have 74,600. And these are warrior men, guys who could wield the sword and the shield.
Right.
So we have 74,600, Issachar 54,400, Zebulun 57,400. Okay. Then from the camp of Ephraim, we have Ephraim with 40,500, Manasseh 32,200, Benjamin 35,400. Of Reuben, we have 46,500, Simeon 59,300, Gad 45,650. Then from Dan, we have 62,700, Asher 41,500, Naphtali 53,400. So for Judah, that comes out to be 186,400 guys. Now figure in women and children, probably
elderly after that too.
You could probably almost take the number and triple it.
Yeah.
Then you have for Ephraim, we have 108,100. And again, figuring women and children. For Reuben, we have 151,450. And then for Dan, we have 157,600. Now, there's 4 animals associated with all of them. And if you go to the throne room of God, when you hear about the 4-sided face of the beast that we see there, they have the lion, the eagle, the ox, and the man. So Judah, obviously the lion. Dan is the eagle. Ephraim is the ox. Reuben is the man. So when they would lay out their camping, the way it was all set up was they laid them out in square formations. Now, there were very, very specific rules. And given that this is being detailed to them from Levites, like essentially everything hinges off what they're having to lead the people to do because they're in direct communion with God. So depending on what your location to the Levites was inside your camping, you could not exceed either the height of their camp or the width of their camp. So going with the round numbers that I quoted, just of the warriors there, and then of course figure in for, elderly and children and women, you've got nominally the same exact number of guys on either side of the Levites camp. Then you've got considerably less by around, we'll say 42,000. Then down below, you have more than the sides by around 30,000. And if you have to build exactly from either the height out or the width up or down, the formation takes on that shape. How amazing is that? Literally in a cross shape. A cross shape, and of course we all know the significance of that cross. But
you ever think God watches this stuff unfold and just gets really cute, feels like get really happy with himself, very content, going these guys don't even know this. Somebody goes, some because he knows that the internet will eventually be a thing and everything. It's like some folks are gonna be putting this and drawing this together one day, and they're gonna be like, "Oh my gosh, look at this! Look at this!"
Yep. But like,
And
how amazing is that? Like literally, like the footprints of God in every single aspect of every single word. Like, why do we have those numbers so specifically as they were in that first census? And then why do we see them decrease inside the second census? Why do we see other ones go up and down? But why is it so hinged on not just the names that are in the camps, but the specific four groupings themselves, what the Levites comprise, and then the very strict rule: can't be wider, can't be taller, or further in length. And then to have that there
yeah,
be the shape, like it's
right. As the dad, trust me, son. I know what I'm doing, and you'll figure it, and you'll realize one day why I had you do it this way. And that's what I said. This is, you know, for those of us who were blessed enough to have a father figure like that who would take us aside and do these things, you understand. And if you have the blessing to have a child and are teaching them something and they're questioning,
yep,
because that's what we do. That's what the Israelites do. That's just our nature.
mm-hmm.
Questioning, why this, why that. So
Yep.
trust me, you'll once it all comes together, you'll figure it out.
Isn't that?
And
I love it.
now,
I tell people get a good concordance. If you know if anybody out there is really looking to study the word and like really get into like the Greek and the Hebrew, I recommend getting yourself an up-to-date NSB translation, but you get yourself also an NASB concordance too, because that's where you're going to find like the most accurate Greek and Hebrew word for word inside there, and put some of this stuff to the test. Like go through here and do your own digging on this stuff. You will be blown away by what you uncover. Because like as Stuart will tell you here, the word of God is inexhaustible.
amen.
There are things every single day that we are finding out that we didn't know thousands of years ago. I guarantee you there's stuff that we're finding out now that people it would have blown their mind if we went back even 60 years and told them.
Yeah.
So like do your own due diligence and get in here.
And that's the beauty to me. That's the beauty of get the sermon that when you're in church and the pastor's giving the sermon, get what they're taking, but they're generally giving you snippets or a parsed down version of the story. When you go through from beginning to end, cover to cover Bible read, you get that context, and those things start to pop out to you, and you start to go, huh? Well, he knew back then that this was going to be going on, or oh, man, that makes so much sense. It's so much, and it just adds so much. It's so much more flavor to it. All right, so we're coming up on 2 hours, and I know that we've all got things that we've got to do, but I wanted to list this because the Rapture just came in with a question.
Sure.
And maybe the question is any opinions on the quote unquote out of India theory and how it wraps in with the story of Noah. I don't know what the out of India theory is.
I'm not really familiar with that either. Are we talking out of India in reference to the children of the East?
I don't know. He might pop in. This might be a good thing because the Rapture was actually on here on my last stream on Friday, and so he's very much he's very much like you, kindred spirits, in the just the desire to educate themselves and dig into all the surrounding information around the Bible and pull out more meaning out of it. So it might be something. Maybe we get him on. Maybe we all collaborate and do something on, or he comes on and just gives us a brief explanation of that.
That'd be great. Yeah, I don't have an answer presently, but give me some time. I will dig into that and I will find an answer for you.
Okay. I'm sure he's got some of his own. I'm sure he's got some of his own, thoughts and feelings on that. So it'd be interesting to see because, like I said, Noah's another part of the Bible that's difficult for people. It's a great place for non-believers to throw that gotcha at you. How did you get all the animals on there? And it's something that we are going to visit on this show. It's going to be something that I definitely want to talk about because
absolutely,
from an apologetic standpoint, it's one of the bigger ones that needs to be tackled because you can start with the premise that every account in civilization has the flood story. So we know the flood happened.
Yep.
But how did it come off? And we touched upon this briefly with our Nephilim discussion. But again, some people take the Bible metaphorically, and if that's your case, I used to take it much more metaphorically than I do now. I take it a little bit much more literally than I used to. That's great. We don't want to mistake the forest for the trees in this case.
Yeah, very much so.
You may be, I could be wrong, you could be right. I don't know. I just lean more towards, I've drifted away from that, lean more towards a more literal translation in many cases. But that's not where we're fed spiritually.
Yep.
is how you interpret Genesis. What it is like I said, are you getting the fundamentals out of the Bible?
Yep.
And are you following Christ and his instructions?
Yep. And a good question too is also like when it comes to clarity and what you'll see when taking the Bible as a whole, you could rip out a page or two from any section of the Bible and you still don't lose the big picture. And I've seen way too many people, unfortunately, like whether it be a biblical debate between two Christian scholars or whether it be in discussion amongst friends at Bible study, like you said, missing the forest for the trees. People can get so hung up on a detail that's way out in left field or way out in the weeds that they miss the actual bigger picture. They miss the big story.
Yeah.
And anytime that happens and you find yourself getting hung up on details or happenings that are detracting from you being able to take the gospel narrative as a whole, then like that's when you got to step back and go, okay, where have I missed here? And what is the outworking of maybe details that I did miss? What is the logical outworking of that? And does that still lead me to Jesus Christ? Because I do believe that you're going to see, if you take any page inside here and you dig hard enough, you're going to find Jesus Christ on every single page. You're going to have to do some digging to find it, but he's there.
Yeah, there's so much prophecy. There's so much foreshadowing of Jesus.
Oh yes,
where it just randomly pops up. And you're like, oh, that sounds like what's going to happen with Jesus. Oh, okay. And it just, like I said, that's what that reading all the way through, and that's not digging into it all that much. So that's what I'm looking forward to. So we'll wrap the show up now. We'll me and Eric talked about it on before the show. We're going to try to do this a bi-weekly thing. We'll iron out the day of the week we try to do this, and make it a scheduled thing, and we'll collaborate on that. And it's great because, like I said, Eric is great content. He's a great personality, and glad that we've gotten to know each other as brothers in Christ.
Same.
So you can follow Eric on Twitter at Eric Rolon.
Yep.
And you can follow him on YouTube at Angel Legend. That is Angel and Legend. They share the L at the end of Angel and the beginning of Legend. For that, like and subscribe to his page. Like and subscribe to mine. I put out content as I try to do it every weekday that I can, in some format or another. And what I'd love to get is as much interaction from the viewers as possible. I would love to say, Brian, you're in here commenting. I would love to see that. I want to, because when I'm doing these reactions, this is my reaction. And like I said, I might consider myself an average Christian, but my outlook might not be the same as someone else's. But I'd love to incorporate that and get that perspective from them, because everybody's got a different life angle that they're looking at things, and the word hits them in different ways. And the truth is the truth, and we're all trying to get as close to that as possible. But a perception on something it's just interesting to see. Like I said, the truth is, and we're all kind of orbiting around it, but you might see it from another side, and you're seeing that truth from a way that might really help and impact somebody in a major way.
Absolutely.
So like and subscribe, comment, tell us what we're doing right, tell us what we're doing wrong. We want to hear
please.
And we will be back with more conversations like this, and we will finish this discussion of the 12 tribes of Israel. Eric, thank you very much. Do you have anything you want to close with?
No, you pretty much summed it all up. Just a big thank you to anybody who watches this. If you can, share it out there, because we're out here doing our best, really be soldiers for the Lord. And as I mentioned with even Paul's epistles, there's a couple commands that were given inside the New Testament, and one of those is love God, and the other one's love people. And we love people by building that community and by furthering His family. So, like, that's the name of the game. Let's make a big old happy family, and let's build out some community.
Amen. Amen to that. All right, folks. Good night, and I'll be seeing you the next time I stream. And of course, we'll have Eric on for the next time he's on. Good night, everybody, and God bless.